Hey guys, it's Justin with Shock Therapy once again, and we are back to show you how to maintain your Polaris RZR. We get calls all the time from people asking what to do as far as maintaining their shocks. But in addition to that, people ask us what they should do to maintain their car. So we figured we put that in a video for everyone to see. Some of the things that we're going to go over today would be maintaining your tire pressure, cleaning out the clutch assembly, oil changes, and maintaining the basic suspension and components on the car, and grease points, things that you should pay attention to. Now, we realize that there are many things you should be doing to your UTV to maintain it. We're going to show you the basics, basically the things that are going to be done every single trip if you can. So to show you how this is done, we have one of our shop leaders, Lauren, who is a certified mechanic and specializes in late model Harleys. The first thing that Lauren is going to show you is tire pressure. Everybody has an opinion as to what tire pressure they need to run, and honestly, it is personal preference based. But lower tire pressures will give you a smoother ride and are better for rocks and slow crawling situations. Higher tire pressures will save the wheel and tire from flats and wheel damage much better than anything in the low pressure area. So if you're running the car hard or racing, you can run the tire in the 18 to 28 pound range if you want to save the parts. If you want a better ride quality, run 14 to 16, and if you're crawling rocks, feel free to go down to 8 to 12. So you can use your tire pressure as an adjustment in ride quality depending on where you're driving. Now we want to get into the clutch assembly. Make sure that you blow that out every 2 or 3 rides. Doing this will keep some of that debris and dust from clogging up the moving parts in the clutch. Sliders and weights will bind due to debris, and this adds belt temperature and decreases belt life. Keeping your clutch filtered and blown out from time to time will save your belt and keep you from having to change the belt on the trail. First, remove all the hardware that holds the outer clutch cover in place. Leave the intake tube attached to the clutch cover, just removing it from the upper fender well. Remove the clutch cover by dropping it down below and working its way between the trailing arm and the frame. With the clutch cover removed, blow out the clutch, concentrating on all the small areas where the weights, springs, and sliding mechanisms are. Continue to blow the clutch out in every small area until you see no dust coming out of it again. Once it's clean, thoroughly inspect the belt for cracks and missing teeth. Also, inspect all the sliding towers on the primary clutch where 2 pieces of aluminum rub against each other. Make sure that these are not excessively grooved and require rebuilding. Install the clutch cover the same way that you removed it, through the gap between the trailing arm and the frame. Install all the clutch cover hardware. Make sure that you don't over-tighten the clutch cover hardware. They're threaded into plastic and don't require much effort. And reinstall the inlet tube into the fender well. Remember, blowing out the clutch is going to give you the longest belt life possible. Next, we're going to check radiator fluid. Checking radiator fluid should always be done with the engine and the system cold. We don't want to check that system while it's under pressure or when the system is hot. Remove the hood to gain access to the reservoir. Check the existing fluid level by looking at the side of the reservoir. There is a mark to show you the full level. If the coolant is below this level, fill the reservoir accordingly. Make sure that you always fill the system with distilled water or a mix of antifreeze and distilled water. Add coolant until you're at the full line. Do not overfill the system. Replace the cap and install the hood. Once your coolant level has been checked and filled, the next thing on the list is the air cleaner. Air filters should be blown out or cleaned out on a routine basis. Or if you have a trip that's extremely dusty or you followed your friends the whole time, you want to clean the air cleaner out every single time. Cleaning the air cleaner will give you the longest engine life possible, and it will also give you the most horsepower possible. If your car, like most people, has a stock air cleaner, typically blowing the air cleaner out can be done once or twice with an airline. Or just toss the filter and buy another one. They're not very expensive. Remember, the stock air filter is just held on by the factory housing. It does not have a hose clamp holding it in place. The air filter on our car is an aftermarket one made by K&N. It has a hose clamp holding it in place and requires that we have to clean it with soap and water. When cleaning or replacing the engine air cleaner, remove the trunk cover first. With the trunk cover removed, you'll have access to the air cleaner box, which is retained by 4 clips, 2 on the top and 2 on the bottom. If you have an aftermarket or K&N style air cleaner like we do, it has a hose clamp holding it in place. Loosen the hose clamp and remove the air cleaner by hand. K&N or reusable style air cleaners need to be cleaned using hot soapy water. Clean the air cleaner slowly and consistently to make sure that you're not tearing the air cleaner itself. Reusable air cleaners like our K&N cannot be cleaned out with an air hose. They must be washed in soap and water. Also make sure not to use harsh chemicals or excessive force when cleaning the K&N style air cleaner. It can damage the element. With the air cleaner cleaned out, let it sit to air dry. Never blow it off with air pressure. With the air cleaner drying, wipe out all of the dirt on the inside of the airbox and airbox cover. If you are using a reusable filter like our K&N, some filters require air filter oil to help with the filtration process. When installing the reusable filter, make sure not to over-tighten the hose clamp as you install it back in the airbox. Remember, the stock filters don't even use a clamp. With the air filter set in place, you can now install the airbox cover. The airbox cover has 4 line-up pins directly in line with the clamps. Make sure that all 4 pins are in the proper spot before you clamp all 4 clamps back in place. We found that it's easier to start with the bottom 2 clamps and finish with the top 2. Remember, keeping your air filter clean keeps the longest life in your engine. The next thing that we want you to check is ride height. This should be done every 2 or 3 rides or every 200 or 300 miles. Or if you add accessories to the car or remove accessories from the car, check your ride height and adjust accordingly. When checking ride height, make sure that you always have the driver in the vehicle. In the front, we want to measure from the lower control arm mount, nearest the firewall, to the ground. With stock tires, this measurement should be between 13 and 14 inches. In the rear of the car, we want to measure from the center of the frame between the radius rod plates to the ground. This measurement should be about 13 to 13.5 inches. Something else that can change your ride height is changing tire height. As you go taller in tire, the ride height will actually increase as well. As a matter of fact, every inch of tire height will increase the ride height by 1/2 inch. This is not something that you have to adjust. It just automatically raises the car by putting a taller tire on it. The reason we mention this is because stock ride heights are in the 13 to 14 inch range. If you run a 32-inch tire, you're going to add at least 1.5 inches to the measurements that we give you for ride height. The next thing that Lauren is going to show you is how to shake down the front suspension on your car. Control arm bushings and other hardware can loosen up and wear out. You want to pick these things out as quick as possible before they become a major problem. When checking the front end components, jack the car up until the tires are just off the ground. You're going to be looking especially at the lower and upper control arm bushing mounts where the arms attach to the frame. Also, pay attention to the tie rods where they attach to the rack and pinion. Grab the tire on the front and rear of the tire, shaking it back and forth as fast as you can, as if you were turning the car by hand. This shaking movement will show you if you have any loose control arm bushings or worn out rack and pinions. Tighten anything that you find is loose. If tightening it does not help, the components need to be replaced. You should also check the wheel bearing play at the same time that you're checking the control arm bushings. The best way to do this is to put your finger on the spindle at the same time that it's touching the rotor. As you shake the tire, you can feel if the rotor and the spindle separate in any way, which is a perfect sign telling you that the wheel bearings need to be replaced. It does help to have a second set of hands at this point when you're checking wheel bearing play. With all of the loose components tightened, you can lower the car back on the ground. Jack the back of the car up until the tires are just off the ground. Grab the top and bottom of the tire, shaking it and lifting it as much as you can. Pay attention to all the radius rod pivot points, looking for any worn out movement or parts. You can easily tell when the radius rod joints are worn out by putting your finger on the joint and the hub at the same time. If you feel any movement in your finger between the joint and the hub or the joint and the frame, that radius rod or joint needs to be replaced. At this time, check the wheel bearings in the rear with the same process as the front, with your finger touching the rotor at the same time touching the hub. Any movement between the rotor and the hub is a sign that the rear wheel bearings need to be replaced. With all of these parts checked and the hardware tightened, drop the car back on the ground. The next step in basic maintenance is to hit all of the grease points on the car with a grease gun. Refer to your manual to show you all the spots that need to be hit. Some of the major components that you never want to forget are going to be control arm mounts and sway bar position. Lubricate all grease points on the car with a grease gun. Consult your manual for all of the positions on the car that are greasable. When greasing control arm pivot points, add grease 1 pump at a time until grease comes out the sides of the bushings. The most important spots are control arm bushings and rear sway bar pivot points.
Oh, perfect.
Most of the pivot points on your car, suspension, control arm, and other items, have grease in them. That grease has to be replaced from time to time. Consult your manual for the positions on the car that have to be greased on a routine basis. The more you use your car, the more you have to add grease. Since you're typically adding grease until you can see it come out of the sides of the bushing, it's a good idea to wipe off all of the excess grease. You don't want to have dirt and dust attaching itself to that point and possibly wearing out the parts further. The next step in our basic maintenance is an oil change, and Lauren will show you exactly how to do that. When changing the oil in the engine, remove the drain plug from the bottom of the engine first. Make sure you have the drain pan in place so that when you remove the plug, the oil drains immediately into the pan. Make sure that you allow enough time for the oil to drain. You know that it's drained enough when it is barely dripping or not dripping at all when you replace the drain plug. Next, remove the factory oil filter and replace it with a new one. It's a good idea to add a little bit of oil around the O-ring of the new filter so that it installs easier. Next, add 2 to 3 quarts of oil to the top of the engine to refill the system. This will give you enough oil to fire up the engine. Start the engine for just 5 to 10 seconds, cycling the oil through the system. With the engine off, check the oil level on the dipstick through the passenger side of the car. Add the amount of oil that's necessary to bring the oil level up to the full mark. Remove the funnel and replace the cap and the valve cover, wiping off any excess oil on the engine. Recycle the used oil if possible. Refer to your manual for oil change intervals, but keep in mind the more that you clean an air cleaner and the more that you change the oil, the longer your engine will last. So there you have it, 8 easy maintenance steps to increase the life of your car. We also know that there's many other things that need to be addressed on these, so consult your manual for the rest of the work that should be done. Also consult your manual for any torque specs necessary on the hardware and fluid levels. Remember, your UTV puts up with a lot of abuse from you, so it's going to last a lot longer if you take care of it. We really hope you guys enjoyed this video. We have more coming in the near future. Leave a comment down below for any vehicles that you would like to see us do basic maintenance on. And as always, don't forget to like and subscribe to our YouTube channel, Shock Therapy LLC.
CrossFit.
That's gonna get some awkward comments. You can fix that, right?
Yeah.
Keep it short or I will lose it. Hey guys, Justin with Shock Therapy, and we are back once again to show you how to take the maintenance. I don't know where that even was going. Right.
You should be able to. I'd come help you, but
Don't judge me
in
right now.
order to make this work for the edit, you just got to get it out.
I should be real good at this. Just kidding. Sorry.